Hello to the chicas. Today on the menu is going to be a topic close to my heart, and that is the different styles of chess. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about positional chess, what it means, what it looks like, and what are the potential pitfalls that low-rated players, club-level players can potentially fall into when picking a certain style and choosing to play chess in a certain way. So without further ado, let's begin. And the beginning in this case is going to mean that I'm going to show you a game, and because of I'm very selfish, I'm going to show you one that I just played. It is by no means a great game, but I thought that it demonstrates some ideas really well, and that will be a really good segue for me to talk about some of the ideas that I wanted to share with you. So let's go. The opening is very irrelevant in the sense especially that you need to be prepared more or less, no matter what openings you play, to be ready for sharp dynamic play as well as quiet maneuver type. Obviously, you can shape the direction of your games rather well with certain opening choices, and in particular by avoiding certain openings. But nonetheless, even if you choose very quiet lines, there is the odd occasion, and there are certainly possibilities where things can escalate, so you need to be prepared. Bishop f4, for example, typically is a more aggressive way to combat the queen's gambit declined. Suffice to say that in the main line of this variation, white castles queenside, and the board is already on fire on move 10, right? Like, this doesn't look like quiet chess. But even with this aggressive setup, sometimes you find yourself in a rather quiet and maneuvery type of position where the center is closed, and there's not an awful lot going on dynamically. And now we need to settle for a maneuvery, quiet type of game. And after knight f6, I'm now going to show you basically the rest of the game. I would have loved to not have the question marks and all that stuff. I'm going to remove all analysis from the game. So let's go back. By the way, I did check I did run the game review, and I scored a 92, which, given that it was a 3-minute blitz, I'm quite happy with. Anyway, so after knight f6, the first port of call for me was to determine where to play, and because of black's pawn c4 move has been played, this pawn formation decides what we need to or should do, and that is always either an e4 break or a b3 undermine of the pawn chain. Now, since e4 is completely off the cards and it's very unfeasible, I immediately directed my attention to b3, and I happily noted that after b5 I had the textbook and very typical a4 move, and now black cannot complete the chain with a6 because of the pin on the a file. And what it means is that the pawn chain is going to explode, and likely we are going to end up in a scenario like this, where I can pick on two potential pawn weaknesses, although they are not weak per se, but I can at least generate some kind of strategies to try to pile up some pressure on those two pawns, which is a typical theme of positional chess. And perhaps this is a good time for me to stop and try to define what positional chess really entails, what it means. So positional chess in general is more of a quiet maneuvery type of style, which is designed fundamentally to create weaknesses in your opponent's camp, whether it's pawn weakness, more typically it is, or structural weakness such as a weak square. It doesn't really matter. So what we try to do is to force these out of the opponent and then systematically pile up on those weaknesses and try to milk that until, you know, you either gain material on the board or you amass sufficient advantage that is going to lead to a victory. Right? Now, this is usually accomplished once again by a quiet maneuver type of chess where we try to optimize piece placement while restricting the opponent. And of course, right away, very famous players, Capablanca, Karpov, in particular, come to our minds, but Petrosyan, Botvinnik to quite a degree as well. And of course, there are many well-rounded players. For example, Magnus Carlsen, who excels as an aggressive attacker, but also has incredible positional finesse. Anyway, back to the game. So after b3, my opponent decided to take. I took back, and they played b6. Now this move I thought was a bit funky, because it immediately created an issue that I thought was relevant, and that was the relative weakness of the c6 square. Now I don't want to over theorize this whole story, but I did notice that rook c1, knight e5, potential knight jump to c6 may become a motif here, and it certainly does feel like that is an extra access point for white, whereas the black bishop is definitely not going to go to b7. In fact, b6 was played not to protect, not to develop the bishop here, but to ensure that the pawn was not hanging. So I played rook fc1, bishop e6, and bishop a6. Now this, although according to the engine is an inaccuracy, I think this move epitomizes really well the concept of positional chess. There is nothing dynamic going on in this position. I am not attacking, I'm not being attacked. It's very stale. It's not even easy to determine plans. In fact, it's particularly difficult to find plans. And so generally speaking, what you are after here is restriction. Trying to play moves that restrict your opponent's mobility, forces weaknesses out of them, and so on. Now the more dynamic bishop c7 followed by knight e5, threatening bishop b5 was definitely much better play than what I did. But bishop a6 still showcases an important concept here. I simply cut out rook c8 from the equation forever. As luck would have it, I'm also threatening to win an exchange, which is also an important side effect of the move. But the fundamental goal, the main idea, was to claim the c file for myself forever. Like, that's my baby, and I want to use that avenue to inflict damage. Opponent plays bishop d6. This sufficiently deals with this threat, since the rook is good to go to b8. I trade, and by the way, the very clever choice of trades is a super important weapon of the positional player. And by that I don't mean to suggest that I am a super cool positional player, but I was very happy to engage with this trade, because with the exchange of the dark squared bishops, my opponent is left with a light squared bishop, which is very awkwardly jammed in between these pawns and has no future whatsoever on the board. Jumped into e5, put your pieces in the center. That's a positional concept for you, by the way. Knight e4, he's putting his pieces in the center. And now it's time to obtain the c-file in its entirety. I'm making very steady progress while my opponent is struggling to find constructive plan. This is the boa constrictor style chess where I'm gradually getting better and better, amassing little advantages until it reaches a boiling point where all of a sudden we will have a forcing win. Queen h4, trying to be a pest. Queen b2, just taking care of the threat. Rook d8 and f3. This was one of the moves that the engine didn't like too much, but I'm dropping like 0.3 of the advantage. Rook c7 was better immediately, doubling the pigs on the 7th. I think it's a bit of a matter of taste. I wanted to get rid of with my opponent's only good piece. Knight e6, queen f2. Endgames, once again, are bread and butter of the positional player, and since I'm dominating the c-file, as well as having a penetration point, as well as being able to target two different weaknesses, I figured this endgame should be very, very close to winnable, if not winning outright for white. King f8, rook c7. This was a silly move. I completely overlooked the fact that after knight e8 I had to retreat. So that's what I did, but this is not a biggie because of course the knight is tragically misplaced on e8, and so they jump back immediately to d6, and now I played the move that I should have played in this position, which is g4, gaining space on the king side, adding h4 in next. Very, very cool play. Once again, just keep on building, 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 and building. Okay, so I went in, back, that was silly, g4, now we are back on track, knight check, king f7, and knight f4. This relocation was very important, because the knight on e5 was a very pretty piece, the knight on f4 is a very useful piece, because now I'm directly attacking one of the most important weaknesses in the position. Rook d7, rook c7. I would like to penetrate via the 7th rank. Rook d8, bishop d3. This was a bit of a meh move. My engine tells me that one of the best ways to go was to do this. And the idea here is the super cheeky knight takes, king takes, and bishop c8, winning an exchange. And this is going to be a concept that I'm going to revisit, because the game actually ended in a very similar fashion, and that is going to be one of my key points in this video. So I pull the bishop back to d3, rook c7, rook takes, rook d7, and of course I'm not trading rooks, although I could. But after rook takes, bishop takes, knight d5, I figured that maybe bishop e6 was giving some counterplay to my opponent, but now upon looking at it more thoroughly, knight c3 just seems to defend the pawn, so maybe it was a mistake. Funnily enough, the engine considers rook c6 to be the best move as well, but honestly I don't really see what's wrong here with white's position. Yeah, this is completely winning too. Anyway, I put back to rook c6. Let's claim that that was my superior understanding of the position. King e7, and after take, bishop f5, my opponent threw in the towel. Now, this is the interesting part. No matter how well you play a positional game, almost certainly what I said about, you know, building up those little advantages until it reaches a culmination, a sort of a climax when it overflows, that moment, 9 times out of 10, is a tactical finish. So this is the point when I would like to bust the myth that you can be a very, very good chess player by mastering one particular style. Well, actually, that's not true. You can. If you are a brilliant attacker, you can. If you can calculate like an absolute god. But there is no chance that you can be a successful player by only playing good positional chess, but being very poor calculator. Because in the end, you will have to see tactical ideas like taking this, which in terms of positional chess is a crime. It's trading the best for the worst piece. It's absolutely a horrific move by positional measures. But positional chess always, always, always gets written off by tactical finesses and tactical, motives and calculation like this. So tactics always beats positional chess. And now, after a fairly big detour, I'm going to just go back to the initial starting point of the video, which is that I just wanted to use this video to very gently warn players anywhere on the spectrum from rating 0 to 2000, but let's just drop it back to, let's say, 1800, to fall in love with positional chess and try to master it like crazy. And it's a very easy trap to fall into, because you start reading chess books and it's like tastes, right? Like some people like Asian food, others like, the French cuisine, others swear by Mexican food, and the same works for chess. If you are given a book with selected games of all world champions, some people will be fascinated by Tal's reckless attacks. Others will be definitely fascinated by the crystal clear and beautifully smooth playstyle of Capablanca, which was fundamentally positional. However, there are two problems with positional chess on low level. One, it's very difficult to master because the understanding of these subtleties require experience, deep understanding of the game, and ironically, quite good calculation and foresight as well. And number two, and this is even more important, games below 1800, irrespective of time control, are decided 99% of the time by tactical oversights or tactical skirmishes. So it doesn't matter how good you play positionally if when it comes to the finishing touch, you don't have the skill set to outcalculate, to outmuscle, to overpower your opponent. And all of that is dynamism, attacking, aggression, and calculation. So this video is to clarify that positional chess is a bit like yin and yang, right? It's 50-50. You need to understand the positional subtleties of the game as well as the tactics. But trying to pretend that that is the only angle of the game and master that is, in my opinion, a very, very bad dead end that you would like to avoid at all costs. And especially you want to avoid it if you try to use this as a way to cover up your tactical shortcomings or your reasonably poor calculating skills. That, makes it even worse. So the obvious way to go about that is to try to practice what's not working rather than trying to avoid the work. And finally, opening choices greatly depend on this taste or fashion or whatever you want to call it. So obviously people choose openings based on what they like, and that's totally fine, right? So if you are a aggressive attacking player and you play d4 and you face the King's Indian, then likely you are going to choose 4-pawn attack, right? That's a very, very cool choice. The Zamish has a lot of aggressive lines too. The h3 King's Indian has some aggressive lines. The list goes on. If you are a quiet positional player, you're very likely to go into fianchetto or King's Indians where you won't get mated, it's quiet, it's maneuvery, and so on. So certain opening choices obviously tell a lot about a player's likes and dislikes. But I would like to warn once again for the last time against, too hardcore focusing on one aspect of the game. A good chess player is never positional or purely tactical. And if you look at the world champions past Petrosyan, yeah? Well, I should rather say starting from Fischer. From Fischer up, although you can determine that Karpov was dominantly a positional player, but that was by choice. He was not a poor attacker by any means, on the contrary. Think about the Karpov-Korchnoi match where he attacked Korchnoi's dragon like a madman. And I could bring up many, many other examples. He just preferred to play maneuver type of chess. But from Fischer up, all world champions were complete players, which meant that they could play on any musical instrument, to bring in an interesting analogy there. And they did have their preferences, right? Kramnik liked quiet maneuver more than attacking. Kasparov was a vicious aggressor. Magnus is a bit of both. Anand was a beautiful blend. Absolutely fantastic blend of both, and so on. So, long story short, try to avoid going very, very firmly toward one direction, because it's not going to help your overall chess. The more well-rounded you are, the more likely that you will be a successful chess player. So try to step out of the positional and tactical. It's okay to have preferences, but make sure that you work on both angles so that yin and yang remains a firm whole and you improve in both departments. With that, we are going to call it a day, folks. Please don't forget to sub, to like, to leave a comment down below, and I'm going to see you in the next video soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.